Libby Prison wasn't just a prison. It was a waking nightmare, a descent into hell on earth. Men weren't just confined, they were consumed by unsurvivable conditions. What you're about to hear isn't just history, it's horror. Richmond, Virginia, during the Civil War, a bustling hub turned into a city of despair. In the heart of it stood a building that had once stored tobacco but became infamous as the Confederate prison known as Libby. For those trapped behind its walls, survival was a desperate dream. Welcome to Historical Digs, where we uncover secrets from the annals of history. The prison's origins. Libby Prison began as a humble tobacco warehouse, its location along the James River ideal for shipping goods. But in 1862, the building's purpose shifted from commerce to confinement. The river made it convenient for transporting prisoners, but it also allowed a veil of secrecy to hang over the horrors inside. Originally built to hold supplies, this structure would soon become infamous for holding Union officers captured in bloody battles, including the 7 Days Battles, where nearly 16,000 Union soldiers were killed, wounded, or taken prisoner. As the war dragged on, Libby Prison's conditions worsened dramatically. What was meant to be a temporary facility became overcrowded beyond control. By 1863, over 1,000 prisoners were crammed into large, open rooms with barred windows that left them exposed to extreme weather. The lack of proper food, shelter, and medical care led to widespread disease and malnutrition, and many prisoners didn't survive the harsh conditions. Yet the true terror of Libby Prison lurked beneath its floors. Are you passionate about uncovering history's hidden stories? Hit the like and subscribe button and let us know what other untold tales you'd like us to explore. Inside the prison. For the prisoners of Libby, starvation was a constant companion. If they were lucky enough, they would receive one piece of bread a day, contaminated with molds. Disease spread like wildfire, and death became a routine part of the prison. Overcrowding made every inch of space suffocating. Hundreds of men were crammed into a few small rooms, with some cells as small as 4,000 square feet packed so tightly there was no room to move. Beneath the first floor, a damp, rat-infested cellar known as Rat Hell served as the prison's dungeon. The darkness down there was so complete that it swallowed any sense of time or hope. These tiny, filthy cells were crawling with rats and insects, the air so thick with rot that even a brief stay felt like an eternity of agony. For those unlucky enough to be thrown into this pit, survival was more than uncertain. It was a distant dream. Nightfall in Libby was no reprieve. Picture this: men spooned together on splintered wood, their groans harmonizing with the creak of the prison's beams. They shifted in unison, not out of comfort, but because pain demanded it. The lack of food, the filth, and the freezing cold worked together to weaken their bodies, making them easy prey for the diseases that ravaged the prison. Libby, originally built to hold 700 men, saw its population swell far beyond its capacity by 1863, housing over 1,000 souls in its rotting walls. Mortality rates soared as Confederate shortages of food and medicine worsened. Men who entered the prison hardly left alive. In the North, Libby became a symbol of horror. Newspapers such as the New York Times detailed the atrocities in the articles titled "Horrors of Richmond Prison," published on November 28, 1863. It described the prison as a brick building with low ceilings and barred windows, through which the winding James River and Belle Isle stands were visible. The sight of pacing sentinels and the realization that escape was impossible made every prisoner's stay a living nightmare. But even worse than the prison's floors were its shadows, where whispers of escape plans began to take root. Tales of desperation. Libby Prison was a place of unimaginable suffering. Nonetheless, within those walls of despair, the human spirit fought back. Prisoners didn't just endure their misery, they resisted it. Desperation fueled their courage, and in February 1864, the most daring and famous escape was attempted in the prison, remembered as the Libby Prison Tunnel Escape, where 109 Union officers risked everything to break free from their captors. Libby Prison was believed to be impenetrable, but that was about to change. For months, the prisoners had been planning their escape in the shadows. Colonel Thomas E. Rose was one of the prisoners, captured in Chickamauga in 1863. From the moment he was brought to Libby Prison, Colonel Rose had one goal: to escape. With the help of Major A.J. Hamilton, Colonel Rose used his engineering skills to orchestrate one of the most successful prison breaks of the American Civil War. The plan was simple in theory, but execution required ingenuity and nerves of steel. Colonel Rose and his fellow inmates began their secret work beneath the prison in a section known as Rat Hell for its infestation of rats. With makeshift tools and bare hands, they dug night after night, inching closer to freedom. The goal was to dig a tunnel beneath the prison, past its walls, and emerge in a vacant lot next to a nearby tobacco warehouse. It wasn't without setbacks. The first tunnel they dug hit the water, forcing them to abandon it. The second ran into the building's log foundation, but the third tunnel, painstakingly dug through the hard ground 1 inch at a time, finally broke through to a small carriage shed just 50 feet away from the prison. Captain Morton Tower of the 13th Massachusetts Infantry recalled in his memoirs, "On the night of February 9th, as soon as it was sufficiently dark, the exodus from the prison commenced. Major Hamilton, Colonel Rose, and some of the projectors were the first to pass through. Colonel Davis of the 4th Maine and myself had passed through the tunnel to the yard just as the clocks of Richmond were striking 12. By dawn, 109 prisoners had crawled to freedom through the narrow, filthy tunnel. Some, like Captain Tower and Colonel Davis, managed to elude capture, reaching the safety of Union lines. In total, 59 escapees made it back to the Union, while 48 were recaptured and 2 tragically drowned in the nearby James River. Among those caught was Colonel Rose, whose tireless efforts had made the escape possible. Even after being recaptured, Rose attempted to flee again, but was unsuccessful. He remained at Libby until he was exchanged on the 30th of April, 1864. Colonel Rose's courage and persistence earned him the rank of Brigadier General, and he now rests in Arlington National Cemetery. His escape from Libby Prison remains one of the greatest tales of defiance during the Civil War. But for those who remained, the nightmare was just beginning. The prison's worst atrocities were yet to be revealed. The Worst Atrocities. Inside Libby Prison, life for the Union soldiers was a nightmare that no one could have been prepared for. The conditions were grueling, the guards unforgiving, and the very walls seemed to close in on every man held captive. Prisoners were routinely punished for even the smallest infractions, such as standing too close to the windows. In some cases, the punishment was death. Guards had no tolerance for disobedience, and prisoners quickly learned to tread lightly, both physically and emotionally. Upon their release, a group of Union surgeons published an account of their experiences in 1863, shedding light on the horrors they witnessed while tending to inmates. Thus, we have over 10% of the whole number of prisoners held classed as sick men who needed the most assiduous and skillful attention. They described a prison where sickness ran widespread and starvation was a daily reality. Yet, instead of receiving the care they desperately needed, the prisoners were left to suffer. The surgeons reported that many prisoners were half-clad and in desperate need of medical attention, but they were often ignored. New arrivals, already sick from their long journeys, would die within a day or two of their arrival. The surgeons were horrified by the systematic abuse, neglect, and semi-starvation, and feared that the survivors would be left permanently broken, their bodies and minds shattered by the torture they endured. One particular story stood out. A group of 200 wounded prisoners from the Battle of Chickamauga was brought to Libby Prison, already weak and in pain. They had been given only a few hard crackers for the 3-day journey, and upon arrival, they were given no food or medical attention for another 2 days. By the time they were treated, many were too far gone to be saved. In 1864, the Daily Richmond Enquirer described the appalling conditions inside the prison. Libby takes in the captured Federals by scores, but lets none out. They are huddled up and jammed into every nook and corner. At night, the floor of every room they occupy in the building is covered, every square inch of it, by uneasy slumberers lying side by side and heel to head, as tightly packed as if the prison were a huge, improbable box of nocturnal sardines. The brutality and neglect of Libby Prison were more than acts of cruelty. They were systemic. Prisoners were treated as expendable, their suffering ignored by those in power. The scars left on their bodies and minds would never fully heal. But for some, surviving the horrors of Libby was a triumph of willpower, a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure even the darkest of circumstances. The aftermath. After the Civil War ended, Libby Prison was dismantled, but its legacy endures. Its horrors became symbols of wartime cruelty, sparking debates about humanity during the war. Libby Prison's purpose was no longer needed, yet its echoes of despair and suffering remained long after the final prisoner had left. In March 1864, as the conflict dragged on, the Confederacy's desperate need for resources led to the evacuation of most prisoners, sending them to more infamous facilities, like Andersonville. Libby became a temporary holding ground, but its history of torment was far from forgotten. As the war came to an end, the prison continued to be used until 1868, when U.S. authorities housed former Confederates within its walls. In the following years, the prison was slowly erased from its original location in Richmond. The West Building was sold to a fertilizing company, and the other parts of the facility were dismantled. In the 1880s, an attempt to preserve its memory led to its relocation to Chicago, where it became the Libby Prison War Museum. Yet, the prison's physical presence was reduced to little more than rubble by 1895. Today, the site of Libby Prison stands nearly forgotten, divided by the Richmond Flood Wall, a silent reminder of its dark history. A simple plaque marks the spot where so much suffering took place. The story of Libby Prison is not just a tale of a grim past, it is a reminder that even in the darkest of places, the human spirit can fight back, resist, and defy the very forces meant to break it. The prisoners who survived its horrors left behind a legacy that cannot be erased, a legacy that stands as evidence of the strength of the human will, even when faced with unspeakable suffering. Libby's story lingers, haunting us with its brutality and its lessons. The physical prison may be gone, replaced by a simple plaque, but the echoes of its atrocities are still felt, resonating with us as a reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink and the resilience that can rise from the ashes of despair. Thank you for joining us in exploring the worst atrocities of Libby Prison. Don't forget to subscribe and come back for more history digs.